Washington.
EFF leader Julius Malema says that the ANC must pay for using a government jet to travel to Zimbabwe. The Red Berets said that the Secretary of Defence must invoice Luthuli House. Malema supports the ANC's mission to Zimbabwe, though, saying that it's urgent and necessary to resolve the political and economic challenges in our neighbouring country.
The ANC's trip to Harare continues to cause controversy. The EFF says the party should pay for its free ride at the state's expense for a bilateral meeting with ZANU-PF. Malema says the governing party should have chartered a private jet instead of using an SANDF jet.
But to use the state resources by the leadership of the ANC, I think it was irresponsible. And we shouldn't be too dramatic about it. We will ask the Secretary of Defense to invoice the ANC, so the ANC pays and they don't repeat that mistake.
The meeting between the two former liberation movements was critical and urgent, according to Malema. This despite the ANC delegation allegedly breaking lockdown regulations on international travel.
Going to Zimbabwe, even under lockdown regulations, it is necessary, it is urgent, and therefore it will be reactionary for anyone to say the leaders should not have gone to Zimbabwe. Remember, as members of parliament, as leaders, we've got permits to be everywhere. And therefore we should not dramatize this thing. Was the need to go to Zimbabwe? Yes, there was a need to go to Zimbabwe. Was the mode of transport used, acceptable? No. The ANC should have hired a private jet if there are no commercial flights and pay it itself.
On their return, ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule told SABC News that the party did not abuse state resources on their one-day trip to Zimbabwe. Samkele Maseko, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, that report by Samkele Maseko, our senior political reporter, and he joins us now live on Skype to give us a bit more of the developments since that report. Samkele, thanks for joining us. A lot of things have been happening during the course of the day. One, a report has gone to the president from yesterday, and today the ANC getting updates.
Yes, indeed. The report by the Minister of Defence, Ramaphosa, is on the President's desk. The question now is, did the President have the time to go over that particular report by the Minister of Defence, knowing that Monday is ANC Monday, and the President was engaged in meetings of the governing party throughout the whole day, starting with a top 6 meeting, and then later on going to the National Working Committee meeting of the African National Congress, deliberating on the various issues that are before the governing parties, such as the address that the President will be giving to the nation sometime this week, and also whether they are going to be easing the lockdown regulations to level 1 or not. Are they opening up borders for international travel or not? And also, you would have expected that the Secretary General of the African National Congress, Ace Magashule, who led that envoy that ducked out of the country or went out of the country to Zimbabwe using that SANDF jet, will give a report on their meetings with their liberation movement counterpart in that particular country, ZANU-PF, and how that meeting unfolded, the various reports that have come out of that meeting. The SG would have given a detailed report to the ANC top 6. You remember that the President also has a special envoy under government's cap led by Mayor Balekambete and Sidney Mufamadi, which also had an engagement with President Emmerson Mnangagwa in Harare at the State House. Then we had the ANC bilateral between ZANU-PF and the ANC at the request of the Politburo of ZANU-PF, in a request that was put through to President Cyril Ramaphosa. So these are some of the issues that have been plaguing the governing party throughout the course of the day, and also some domestic issues. But it does look as if the President has his hands full when it comes to dealing with this particular matter, knowing very well, Peter, that the trip by the ANC officials or envoy that was led by the SG was sanctioned by the highest decision-making body of the African National Congress, between conferences, which is the National Executive Committee, and it is the President of the ANC who communicated that after engagements with President Emmerson Mnangagwa of Zimbabwe, there was a request that the two two political formations have a bilateral, knowing that the president knew very well and owned the trip of the ANC to Zimbabwe. The question is, was the president in the loop on how this particular ANC delegation would be traveling to Zimbabwe, and how did this official trip or working trip of the Minister of Defense Nosiviwe Mapisa come about, or was it just a camouflage for the African National Congress just to get a free ride at the state's expense and the taxpayers' expense to go and have a bilateral with ZANU-PF? But it seemingly looks like some left formations within the country who have the same ideological inclination as the African National Congress, like the EFF, seem to think that that meeting was critical and important and needed to happen, but just that the ANC should have not used state coffers to fund their trip to Zimbabwe.
I watched with great interest. You were at Waterkloof and you saw the delegation arrive, and you did ask that question, and the responses almost gave us a version of what they had believed going there. It may change slightly, I guess, once they've had a chance to think through things, but your initial thoughts about what they were saying, it almost came across as if they were feeling justified that the ANC could use state assets.
They were essentially saying that the trip to go to Zimbabwe was essential, it was important, it was critical, knowing that they were estimating through Lindiwe Zulu, the head of ANC's subcommittee on international relations, that there are about 2 million Zimbabweans in the country. It also affects the department, particularly when it comes to the rolling out of the unemployment fund of COVID-19, which is about 350 rands. They needed to go to Zimbabwe, and if Zimbabwe fails, it basically has a negative impact on the country. They were basically camouflaging the government using of state resources, in also saying that the ANC plays a critical role in the governance of this country, and they had to use that particular avenue to go to Zimbabwe. For instance, you go to the comments of the Minister of Social Development, also the chairperson of the ANC's subcommittee on international relations, that would be Lindiwe Zulu, and the comments she was making in saying that the trip was very essential. She also used it as an opportunity to engage with her counterpart in Zimbabwe, who's taking care of social development in that country. We go to the comments by the ANC's NWC member, Takota Lekwete, in speaking on the particular matter and saying it was of national importance. And it also speaks to the line of march that the Department of Defense is also stated through their spokesperson, Pure Yamini, who does say that they used basically gave the ANC that lift in the national interest of both countries. You also look at how the special envoys that were sent by President Cyril Ramaphosa in the first time around, that would be Balegambete and Mufamadi, how they were received by the President of Zimbabwe, Emmerson Mnangagwa, how they were not allowed to engage with other political formations and civic organizations in the country. Also look at how the ANC delegation was also not able to engage with opposition parties and civil organizations in that country, which prompted the Secretary General of the ANC to basically say that they would be engaging with these political formations like the MDC Alliance led by Nelson Chamisa. They would either be going back to Zimbabwe, or they would be calling them and welcoming them into the country to engage with them back to the ANC's headquarters at Soya Street, that would be Luthuli House. So it basically tells you that the ANC was not ashamed that they used state resources. You go to the direct question that we as the SABC asked the Secretary General of the ANC, Ace Mafashule, if they had abused state resources in going to Zimbabwe. His answer was simply no, which basically tells you they're not ashamed. They were proud of themselves for going to Zimbabwe and using state coffers. But in hindsight, Peter, if one were to also look at the socio-economic, political challenges that Zimbabwe does face, one does also get a sense that the meeting may have been very important. They needed to have that bilateral with ZANU-PF. You also go to back in 2018, 2019, when the former statesman of Zimbabwe was also late. There was a Secretaries Forum of Former Liberation Movements, which was taking place at Victoria Falls. We look at the comments that were made there by the ANC's political heavyweight in the form of Tony Ngeni, in saying that former liberation movements must take accountability and responsibility for the socio-economic impasses and challenges that their countries face. You look at the heart-to-heart and heated meeting that recently took place between ZANU-PF and the ANC now, and the allegations and reports that are there that basically ZANU-PF told the ANC to leave Zimbabwe affairs alone, which speaks to the bilateral and the relations between the two political formations that are seemingly soaring day by day.
All right, you mentioned the word challenges a couple of times there, and that's the word that ANC Secretary General came back with, but he was his first comments last month. He said that the governing party was engaging with former liberation movement over widespread human rights abuses and repression. What do you think happened that he changed from that language to almost denying that there's a crisis in Zimbabwe?
Well, Peter, one can only assume that people's dirty linen from both sides were put to the table, and there were no holier-than-thou individuals when it came to that particular meeting. You've heard some of the reports that the ZANU-PF was not particularly pleased with the ANC delegation, saying that some of them had no clue what was happening within that particular country. The only person who seems to be abreast and in the know and updated and with knowledge of what was happening in Zimbabwe seems to be the head of international relations. That would be Lindy Zulu. You look at the how seemingly soured relationship between the two formations. Now you look at the outburst that you've seen by some of ZANU-PF Politburo and Central Committee members, and the remarks that they've had on people like the former president of Botswana, Ian Khama. You look at those comments that are coming out there. You look at the hard stance that ZANU-PF has also taken on the political formations in South Africa, like the Economic Freedom Fighters. It seems as if they may be suffering from the same sins of incumbency, if one may put it like that, as the African National Congress, and not wanting to hear the negatives about them from others. And they would be debating that you yourself are no different from us. Those are some of the issues that are seemingly coming out. And you look at the ANC delegation, and in some way, some of the ANC members, in the way that they were speaking, you look at Tony Ngeni. Tony Ngeni was a bit diplomatic in his responses, but he was saying that it was a forthright, honest and robust meeting that they had with ZANU-PF. And you know, Tony Ngeni, he doesn't hold back in speaking his political views, whether it be on domestic or international issues. So it tells you that it was really a heated meeting, and some of the comments that were made may have not been taken lightly by other of the political formations. And you also look at how President Ramaphosa's special envoy of government was not so warmly received, as they weren't able to engage with other political formations in that country. So it basically tells you that there is a lot going on between the African National Congress and ZANU-PF and their relations that they are having. But it seems as if the government of South Africa is putting its foot down as well, and saying that you need to sort out your affairs, because if you don't sort out your affairs, you used to be the breadbasket of Africa, and now you are seemingly in the economic doldrums, and that has an adverse and negative effect on the South African economy as well, and the South African social welfare bill, particularly when you look at the recent court judgment when it comes to political refugees and asylum seekers in the country being able to gain access to that unemployment fund of 350. And also you look at the xenophobic attacks that sometimes sporadically spring up in South Africa's Minister of Social Development and ANC head of International Relations, Lindy Zulu, saying that they also needed to sort those issues out with Zimbabwe. With Zimbabwe's challenges continuing as they are, it basically means there'll be more and more influx of Zimbabweans into the country, which will cause a socio-economic and socio-political problem for the governing party, that would be the African National Congress.
Samkele Maseko, thanks very much indeed, as always, for insightful reporting on issues political. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. All right, that's our senior political reporter, Samkele Maseko, speaking to us about how it must be a difficult time for the president, trying to figure out how to manage this trip to Zimbabwe by the ANC delegation and a few of his ministers.